Happy to see so many people again, so to be part of the community and meet each other again face to face is really great. I'm also, I've been a sustainability consultant now for 20 years, so also for me it's really exciting times, and also to see many case studies here and also new and established service providers, what you offer, and the number of new products coming out is really thrilling. Some of them are also very interesting for our clients, and that's why I'm also interested to be in dialogue with you. I wanted to be here and discuss a little bit also the challenge of really integrating climate neutrality in the boardrooms and with companies. And I'm trying to have or show it a little bit from a holistic view, because as I said, I'm a sustainability consultant. Nevertheless, we are familiar with the world of scope 1, 2, 3. Like Christoph here, we have probably helped about 20 companies worldwide to establish science-based targets, and we do also many carbon balances and stuff, but this is integrated in our overall service package. We are boutique consultant. Our motto is basically inspiring meaningful change, which often means that we try to work and often achieve that for clients for more than 10 years. So we are really part of a journey where we help companies to transform. Sometimes it's incremental, sometimes there are larger steps we can help to achieve, which is then also, gets me up in the morning and go to business every day with this inspiration. We are boutique consultant, 4 offices. We started in Boston and Zurich 20 years ago, now it's in Munich and Nashville. We have about 20 people, so still relatively small, but growing. We have about 200 clients worldwide right now in about 20 sectors, so we are not specialized on certain sectors. And last but not least, as you can see, our service is really coming from strategy work with the boardroom to really implementation and monitoring, to also we are one of the leaders in sustainability reporting, which is often still a door opener for us to get into a company and then help also to convince that it needs goals, that it needs climate neutral solutions, etc. Let me start. I'm a trained natural scientist, so for me, 1 ton of CO2, it's clear for the climate. This is not to be discussed. It's not a bookkeeping question, but in the context of business consulting, where you discuss that in the boardroom, it's not often so clear what a ton of CO2 can be very different. I mean, sometimes when the discussion starts, hey, what does it mean to get climate neutral? You get maybe the answer, compensation seen as greenwashing. Others think that's the solution. The net zero discussion adds, of course, quality to that. So I want to say, when you look at the decision makers, the perception of those people towards climate neutrality can still be very different. And it's part of our job, and certainly of many of yours, to convince people that climate neutrality has, of course, in my view, to be a package where you have to reduce, you have to substitute, and you have to compensate, or to even go into net zero solutions. I don't know, I don't know whether you have seen this news from China. I find it quite remarkable, and that's the situation I want to avoid to have in a business, that basically 31 provincial governments were forced to shut down electricity or cut off the power for some time. You see this here in a large Chinese city. Why? Because they have tough climate neutrality goals and they have a shortage of renewable energy, so they really were forced in a situation where they cut off the power. That's a situation, honestly, I want to avoid for a company that a company has set carbon neutrality goals and then in the end is forced to cut off some business. So that's maybe a warning signal that business planning, growth planning, and also climate neutrality planning have to go hand in hand. That's very important, and I think climate neutrality planning is therefore not something which can just happen in a silo, can be delegated. It's really also a topic on a very strategic level. Also, I mean, I see many companies here with great cases, but the world does not only exist of Nestle and other Novartis and other great companies who are thought leaders in this or might go a very line. What happens with the rest? What happens with the other 10,000 companies which need to follow at a certain point in time? We did here a study together with Kleberg, a tax and legal consulting company in Bavaria, where we looked at 50 medium-sized and family-owned businesses and wanted to know how do they talk about climate neutral products, etc. And there's still a huge gap when you look at that the small and medium companies and also the medium-sized companies still have quite a large way to go there. And in my experience, they have to be especially convinced also with business reasoning to go that way, because they won't be praised from the start as being a superstar and be the first in doing this. A few examples from clients from us. Dettwiler, a Swiss company. You probably, many of them experience their products because in every Nespresso capsule you find a sealing ring, which is produced by Dettwiler, for example. So they are specialists in sealing solutions based on rubber materials. They said, I would say the classic way, they have about 80,000 tons of CO2 emissions, scope 1 and 2. And they said, okay, we want to get climate neutral till 2030. First, operations. So that's about it. We had many discussions, and like I would say they did it the Bosch way. They said, okay, we want to have not just climate compensation, we want to reduce, we want to substitute. We follow science-based targets, at least for operations. And if there are non-avoidable emissions, we compensate them in the end, or hopefully go to a net zero solution at some point. Of course, like so many, I need a little bit of water. Sorry about that. Like many companies, they face a scope 3 challenge. And the scope 3 challenge, in my understanding, is much more fundamental because you might change your product world. It's no longer something you can deal with just by getting more energy efficient and getting more renewables. You might really change your business in quite a way. Many companies on the way to climate neutrality realize that too late, or it's not very clear at the beginning. So something to consider is also to convince them to think about that early on and see that as a chance. In this case, we really help them to get an eco-design, a cradle-to-grave mindset into product development and see this as a chance. But this is a long-term adventure you cannot change overnight, especially with companies which are really successful like Dettwiler. These days, and that's a first thing, I think it's very interesting, they are part of the Alliance to Zero with other pharmaceutical companies and suppliers, that they really want to go the way in the highly regulated healthcare sector, which is not easy, to get to net zero emission products, which is quite a journey, but it's an interesting one. So the Scope 3 challenge is something to consider on the way. Another company is Swiss Primesite, in Switzerland, the largest real estate company on the stock market with about almost 200 large real estate objectives. They said, okay, we want to be climate neutral till 2040. This does include certain Scope 3 elements, at least. And they had really a plan, which I find impressive. They say, okay, we spend in the next 19 years 600 million Swiss francs in this case to really step by step enable this reduction pathway. It needs a long-term thinking, it needs an investment plan, and many people, I mean, we have other peers as clients, think, wow, that's a lot of money, that's quite a commitment. But it's interesting to see that on a board level, by doing this, Swiss Primesite on the other side was able to be seen as a leading company by ESG rating companies, by investors, and that enabled them quite successfully to start a green bond with 300 million Swiss francs. So it's access to capital you can achieve when you go the carbon neutral way. That's at least one important factor. And that's something to consider when to convince people. The big picture for a company, and I don't know, many of you know, I guess, who knows what TCFD means in this room? It's interesting. It's I show you because for me this is almost the most important abbreviation these days in sustainability, because that's really a driver in the boardroom. In the in the world, we basically, the context is we have a company has a footprint on the planet. That's what we hear talked about today in many cases. What's the footprint? How can we reduce it? Is it science-based target? Whatever. The other one is also there, and that's the perspective on investors. Hey, we have climate change. There's risk on the company. We want to know if we invest you as a company, how much is our investment on risk? And TCFD is, in my understanding, a game-changing framework which asks exactly for that. TCFD wants to know what's your governance structure to be able to understand climate risk? What's your strategy to minimize it? Is it included in your risk management? And what are metrics and targets to do so? So in Switzerland, for example, TCFD gets regulated. It's all stock market companies will have to start doing that. The law will start next year. And in the EU, there are certainly many reporting initiatives as well, which include elements of that. In this case, it forces you, like in the real estate business, it forces you not only to think about a climate reduction pathway, but also to really think about, hey, what's the climate risk if we have much more, if there are heat waves coming, if there are 3 times more heat days per year, our asset, if you have lots of concrete-based objects, they might get heat up and lose value over time. So you have to do something there. This TCFD, in my understanding, will play a major role for many of you guys when offering your products, because board members right now look at the TCFD because they have a liability in the future if they don't tackle that. I think no, it's okay. Yeah, I'm closing soon. my message is basically, like maybe many in the room here, they're dreaming of companies transforming, and I had many talks out there with people who have tried to convince their company in the last 5 years to make a major jump. And we also heard that sometimes large companies don't want to change too much. So what we see normally is incremental change. But more and more, I think, the climate change topic has the potential to be really a driver for transformational change. And that happens sometimes, as I had 3 examples like last week where people said, hey, you talked about science-based targets. We want to reduce 1,000 tons till 2025. Right now they have 80,000. Is that a lot? I said, God, no, this is not a lot. So the question is, how can I go from a thinking which is insight-driven, feasibility-driven, to a more one where you have an outside-in perspective, you get the context, you want to have a fair contribution, and you want to look also as a future-oriented company who does the real thing for its employees, for the clients, and also for the suppliers. And in the end, the investors will also profit from that. So that's, in my understanding, one part of what the community should really think about, that it's not only about selling solutions, obviously, but they have to fit in something which really helps the company to be transformed. I don't have the time to do that, so in my case, and I'm happy to talk about that at the round table, a business plan and carbon neutrality plan belong together. I think I see too often that it's treated in silos and that not even the business growth is represented in certain scenarios, which should be absolutely the case. I also want to strengthen that accepting carbon risks, if a company is aware of what they are doing, also maybe, hey, there is the scope 3 thing, I have no solution yet, but if we now really tackle this problem, we might find a solution in the next 10 years. So it makes the business stronger, more resilient. And in the end, in my understanding, the topic is one where we these days really a company can take employees, clients, suppliers on the journey and make them part of the solution. And that's really the thrilling thing if that happens. Okay, happy to discuss later on. Also to be bold as an owner of a boutique consultant, I might say so. We today started a recruiting process for a senior consultant, climate strategy, and data-driven services. If somebody is interested in that to work in Zurich, which is a beautiful city, you are very welcome to approach me today or tomorrow or at any time. Thanks for that.